when you think about anxiety, why would we want to study this? And by the way, if you'd put in the chat that you hear me fine, everything's going great, that'd be awesome. Also, pop in where you're from. Everybody loves to see that sort of stuff. So, and I would too. So it'd be great. Why in the world would we want to talk about anxiety? And there's a very simple reason, and that is, well, there are really three. So the first is that anxiety dictates your actions. Okay, so anxiety dictates your actions, and what that means is, if you think it through, if you're anxious about something, it'll sort of tell you what to do. It'll tell you how to behave, and as a result, it kind of leads you in a bad path. So we want to be on a good path, but you can think about it like, if someone's anxious about asking someone out for a date, they can be so anxious they never do. So that opportunity goes away. If someone's anxious enough about getting married, there's another example, the runaway bride phenomenon. So and it can be both. You can be anxious about not marrying, so you say yes to somebody you don't want to marry, and then when it gets there, you're so anxious about marrying that you run away. So it's kind of driving these actions. You can I just one more example. You can think about asking for a raise or applying for a job. If you're anxious enough about it, it'll drive your actions, especially away from asking for a raise or not asking for enough, or it'll drive you into not applying for a job. So this is why it's really an important thing. The third thing, it dictates actions, I'm sorry, the three. I've only mentioned one, so two more. Number two is why we want to study it or understand it, is that you basically are anxious in order to feel good. Now, for you, it would be feel better, but I'm going to argue you want to feel good compared to whatever you think is going on. So anxiety is something we'll do to ourselves to get us to a place of taking action that we think will help us avert the problem, the anxious or anxiety producing problem. So we're motivated there to do good, basically, and we basically feel better by being anxious. I know that's weird, but it's a thing. Third, the problem. So look, we've got, it dictates actions. You do it to feel good, and then anxiety has a problem, and the problem, the actual leverage issue is your imagination. Anxiety is an imagination problem. And so if you're trying to fix anxiety, like with a reality solution, when it's an anxiety problem, it's not going to work so swift. And I give you an example. I remember some years ago, a lady was in my office for counseling, pastoral counseling. And she was sharing with me this situation. She was upset, and she started telling me about it, and she started tearing up, and I said, hey, wait just a second. And I went into my other office and moved some papers around and came out, and I said, I'm sorry, keep going. And she started talking, and then she started tearing up, starting to cry. I said, oh, I'm sorry, one more thing I've got to do, I apologize, please forgive me. So she stopped crying, and then I went and did something else. I was trying to teach her something, so hang in there. I wasn't being cruel. And so I came back, and she started telling me about it, and she cried a little bit, and she was telling me stuff. And I said to her, can you imagine a time in your life when you felt really pretty? And that was relevant to the story. And she described a time, she thought about it, and it was a time when her aunt, I think, gave her a white dress, and she was a little girl, and she remember looking at herself in a long mirror wearing this dress, and she felt really pretty, and you could see her face would glow, and she smiled, etc. And I said, I want you to notice you moved from tears to stop, tears to stop, tears to a wonderful smile. You have so much more influence over what goes on and how you feel. Because my premise, and we do this in the emotions course where we teach kids how to do this, is that the reason you're upset is because you're thinking upsetting thoughts. And the moment you discover your will isn't about making yourself do stuff, but your will is about the ability to direct your mind, imagination onto something different. And it's not a mind game. It's actually how the thing works. So what I want to do is talk to you about how anxiety actually functions. And it works like this. It's your imagination, right? And your imagination is going out into the future. And that's what we really build everything out of. We build it out of the future. I've talked about this before. It's not so much the past and the sequence of things. The past doesn't really predict very well. You know, if a turkey got up every day starting in January and ate on the farm, the farmer talked nice to him and got to play in the yard, eat things and play with the friends, and every day food and water and care and love and wonder. That turkey can start predicting, man, the next day is going to be great too. Next day is going to be great until Thanksgiving comes. And then you know the story. So we're not trying to look at, what's happened in the past predicting our future. And that's what people will do. It's really about your future. And so what we do is we think about the future and we can change the present. And so if you're thinking about the future and you have anxiety, what you're thinking about the future is that it's going to be bad. I'll let that soak in. So you're going to think about the future and it's going to be bad. And what you've got imagined in your mind is a future that's going to happen and it's going to be bad. And so that generates anxiety, which generates a strategy for you to try to avoid that future happening. You know, sometimes we have something happen in the past, and something in the past we project is going to dictate something in the future. And so we kind of combine those things. But generally, when you think about the past and bad things, you're depressed, right? When you think about the future and bad things, you're anxious. So when you look at this and we think about homeschooling, and I'd be happy to, you know, help you think about something if you'd like to come on I realized I hadn't sent invitation. I'll do that in a minute. If you'd like to come on to our Zoom meeting, glad to talk to you. Think about it. You don't have to show me your face. You can't show your face. It's all great. But when you think about it with homeschooling, it's easy to fall into, what if I do a poor job? What if my kids don't turn out well? What if the government gets us? I don't know. Jody always had the thing that, especially in those early days where there wasn't much evidence, that the kids wouldn't be able to do college. They wouldn't be able to do the life they wanted, that we could mess them up and not really teach them the stuff that they needed to learn. Now we have 5 kids, 11 grandchildren. They're all employed. They have houses. Life goes on. And everybody, you know, is doing super duper, you know, relative to what's going on. So with you and your kids, here's what you're wrestling with. The first thing is to learn to think clearly about how you're not a prophet or a prophetess, that you actually don't know the future. They say, you know, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, something like that. It's great for politicians. I can't make sense of it. Because when we don't know the future, we actually aren't afraid. That's the way the game works. We are afraid when we think we know exactly what's going to happen. And the problem is, not only are we a prophet or prophetess, but we actually only have one option out there. And so whenever we can think about the future and it being good or not knowing, either way feels different. It's not anxiety. Anxiety is generated by knowing that one thing is going to turn out bad. In fact, technically, people who have an anxiety about a certain thing, and I'm not talking about overall pharmacology or neurobiology or anything like. If you have an undercurrent of anxiety, that's a little different conversation. But situational and imagination. Most of our anxiety is this stuff. When you have that kind of anxiety, you are actually a man or woman of faith, and a lot of faith. It's almost admirable, because what you've got is faith that this terrible thing's going to happen. You just know it is. And so as a result, you're going to have that anxiety. And then what we talked about is going to dictate actions to you. And some other things, aren't going to necessarily go the way you want it to go. So when you're dealing with anxiety with yourself, what you want to do is try to get clear about what you're afraid of, and then start literally trying to think about two other options about how it might go. Because if you can, and I'm not saying guaranteed, I'm just saying it's possible, it's in the domain of possible. If you can think of 3 possible outcomes, you can't be anxious about it. There's not a way to do it. If you think of 3 different outcomes, then what happens is you can't have faith in that one. And so that anxiety will calm down. The other way to go, and this kind of goes more with the kids, is trying to help the kids understand what's going to be good, how it's going to be. So a child might be afraid to go in swimming. It'll be cold or something. Let's make up something that actually happens. And you can make it a choice. You can make them or whatever. You can try to find out what they're anxious about. They don't like cold water if they're like me. But if you can get them to use their imagination, yeah, you'll get in the water and be cold. And then in a little bit, it won't feel cold anymore, but you get to play with your friends. How will it feel to play in the pool with all your siblings and friends? And they say, good. And if they think about the positive thing past the negative, they're going to be happy. This is how athletes do it. They may not like swim practice, but they love the competition. So if they think about the competition, they feel good and they can tolerate the swim practice. So the anxiety can calm down. I figured this out years ago when I was starting to speak publicly. I've been public speaking since I was 14. Dad was in the legislature. And so I had to do talks for him too. But what I realized one day was about the fear of public speaking is like the worse than death or anything. And I realized, I said, I can't tell if I'm afraid of speaking or if I'm excited to. And as a result, I started assuming I was excited. And when I did that, it made me think about the outcome of the talk. Not that I'd necessarily enjoy it or be dashing and debonair, but that if I had some nuggets, or I got to talk about something I really cared about, or I was able to get that audience to think about something in an entirely fresh way, well, in that specific context, my anxiety turned into excitement because I felt good about what was about to happen. So that was the exact game, right? So we are homeschoolers are out there. I mean, it's a terrible world, and politics is crazy, and the media is crazy, and relationships and family and in-laws and outlaws and physical problems. And if I just talked to a friend who's got a very severe cancer, we just talked for about a half an hour. I hadn't talked to him in years, but I'd heard about it. And all these things can go on. But if we can get our minds, our imagination, really to be more truthful, honestly, it's just telling the truth. And the truth is you don't know the future. So if you don't know the future for your homeschooling, what you're going to do is you're going to try to build on good principles and say, look, here are the good principles, like we did: reading, writing, arithmetic. So good principles, and we're teaching them how to be disciplined and how to teach themselves, and they're learning things about math and then extracurricular arts and language, different things. All those things that on balance, if we keep doing those things, odds are it's going to turn out well. Not saying Thanksgiving may not come, but odds are it's going to actually turn out pretty well. So that's the essence. So anxiety, you want to think about it, what you're anxious about, get it clear. Number 2, you want to own up to the fact that you're not a prophet or prophetess. You do not know what the future is. and you don't know how it'll turn out. It may go another way. And 3, you want to work at thinking 3 options, not 1, 2 more about how in the world it might go. And what you're going to find is that anxiety will drop. If you can go further and start thinking about how it might turn out good, it's all the better. And that usually goes into the options as well. So if I want to copy invite link, I want to invite people to join our Zoom call, and I'm just not yet competent at that. I think the password is something like Fred. Let's get over here and see if I can live chat. Does this work? Jody's going to come in a moment. She wasn't here last week, but she is this week. Pop out chat. Let's see what that does. Read transferring. Love you, man. You're awesome. Oh, Sharud, you're just being honest. That's all that is. All right. So theoretically, this link would get you to join us on Zoom. Join on Zoom. I think Jody's there. So I think the password is Fred or Fred. I don't know which. I should be more organized than that. So here we are. So we want questions. I've got some comments here we'll look at. Let's see if I can get Jody in the picture. Wait a minute. You gotta wait. No, you gotta wait for a second. Okay. We got to see where we are. We got too many screens open. There you are. Look at you. So, Zoom meeting, and you see where you are. So, okay. What we need to do, I'll just move that screen a little bit. Yeah. So there we are. Ta-da. So what kind of questions? Let's see. Hear great. Listen from North Carolina. I hear you in Romeoville, Illinois. I haven't heard of that. Anxiety as a driver. Yes, it definitely is and can be. Anxiety started in a car crash 2 years ago. I had to go to therapy. Yeah, so you can have these traumas. We're just not close to each other. It's just the way this works. Yeah, you can have a trauma, and then the trauma sets in motion. It could happen again or something like that. Jody, for example, has always had a fair bit of anxiety about driving. Can I share this?
Sure.
The way I do it. So she had her grandmother and her 2 older sisters killed in the same car wreck. Now she was 1 or so, right? But always driving was issue on the road. She didn't even get her driver's license till she was 20, 19.
19.
Yeah, a year or so into college. I mean, many years after 16 in the state of Alabama. And so as one time, as we kind of worked it through, maybe several times, and thought about it, it kind of became very clear that what she was worried about was being the cause of other people dying if she wrecked, something like that. And the trauma that had done her family, she kind of got in her mind that that would be terrible, and it would be terrible. But she also got in her mind it was also terrible not to be able to take children to swim practice or church or whatever it is. So she started, making sense of that, and she still's not fond of driving through Houston or something. But yeah, that is the game. And again, if you're using the past to predict the future, not good. If you're using principles, the odds are in your favor. But if you're just sure because of something in the past, something in the future is going to happen, you're kind of making that up. You don't know that will happen, and that drives the anxiety, if that makes sense. So what kind of questions you got? Yeah, Fred's the password. Small F. So there we go. Somebody just said. How do you I do have a question on, somebody wrote me about spelling, and I'll get to it in a minute. But while we're on anxiety, if you want to talk about that, that'd be great. Anything else on homeschooling, family, life, I even have a few opinions on how to catch fish. So you're welcome to throw anything out there. How do you homeschool and not look haggard after a few years?
Oh gosh.
First, we'd have to ask, I got more to the question. How do you uh, live for a few years and not look haggard? There's that problem. So I feel like when I went into this a few years ago and I look relatively young and fresh, and I feel like it's aging me fast. And it could be, they always do these pictures of these presidents that how they look before and after. I think honestly, in the past 100 years, Trump was the only one that didn't look different than before. But it may have been a thing like my grandmother. My grandmother didn't look like she aged. She lived to 102, for even into her 90s. But she looked so old at 50. So sometimes you peak early and then it levels off. So it can wear on us. And I guess, the trick to not letting it wear on you is learning how to run a system that isn't wearing on you. This is why we developed that 30 minutes a day course and showed how when you set up systems and processes, and if you can get things under control and there's some regularity and predictability and the kids quit fighting with you about it and they are learning, etc., you'll find that there's a great deal of calm that can happen in the system. If you're doing something new every day, if you've got like ADHD and you take some caffeine to add to it, and then you worry about enough things in a row, and then we try this day and this day, and we're going to do math late, and we're going to do it early, and we'll do it over here, and we're going to skip over there, skip over that, and jump around, and you can put that book down and do this book. I mean, that I already feel older just thinking about it. So I would say the more you can create moments of predictability, some routine, some habit in your homeschool that is your overall pattern, doesn't mean you can't interrupt it, but your overall pattern, that allows things to calm down. And if you're taking a good approach to homeschooling, you'll grow in your confidence, and that helps tone it down too. So somebody said, which 30-day course is called specifically? I said 30 days. If I said that, I'm sorry. I meant 30 minutes a day. So we have a course called in our big package of all the courses on emotions and memory and problem solving and all the rest about how to homeschool in 30 minutes a day. And it goes through teaching you how to set up systems and routines in small segments for things and how that works. And by the way, attention deficit. Oh, squirrel. I've got that. But that doesn't mean we couldn't set up a game plan in which it works. So that's part of the thing.
Just not having to make all those decisions every day is going to help your well-being.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it's exhausting. You can only make so many decisions in a day. And if you don't have to make the decision of when are we going to do math, like we do math at 8:30 a.m. or 8:32 a.m. for an hour or whatever you do, or two, we did an hour in reading. We had 2 hours of math. But when you know when it is, you don't have to decide. It's the same thing. I've noticed this from my background, people going to church. If you get up every day, every Sunday, not every day, but if you get up every Sunday, if you go to a church that meets every day, you need a different church. But if you go every Sunday or go on Sundays and you get up every Sunday and say, are we going to go or not? And you debate that through, you won't go that much or as much, and it'll be kind of stressful. If you decide we're going to go to church on Sundays, we're going to church unless something interrupts. We're on vacation, somebody's sick, but we're going, it's pre-decided. That's not a debate topic anymore. That takes decisions out of your life, and your consistency picks up and your stress can drop.
Yeah.
What do you want to say about all that?
No, that's true. I mean, it's sorry, Fred's phone's ringing. It can be, I mean, just having a bunch of kids, even if you weren't homeschooling them, it's going to be hard on you. And it's much easier, even if you're not homeschooling, to have lots of routines and all. But just think of how much driving you might be doing if they were all in different schools or whatever, so it's just the more kind of set things, semi-routines, make this, we don't have to decide these things daily or weekly. This is kind of how we do life. Even to the point of, and I was not good at this at all, but having a routine of meals, 2-week rotation of meals, set time to go to the grocery store, things like that. All those things will free you up.
Exactly. That's the game. And don't mishear this. So a lot of us will get into what's called splitting. Splitting is black and white thinking, where you think things are either way, one way or the other. And so one way you can definitely think about it is that you actually need a routine, but then you make everything so regimented it's insane, right? Or you can say, I don't like routines, so then everything is chaotic, you know? So there's something in the middle where wisdom lives that's not, you know, playing out on the extremes. So I'm not trying to say hyper regiment your house. That's crazy. Putting in one system at a time and then building, that's what we show in the course, is how to do it.
And getting the kids involved in the life of the house. Are you doing everything? Are they learning to do their own, you know, clean their own rooms, their bathrooms, the laundry, whatever it might be? That can also free a mom up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and I'd say that's a big deal. I mean, kids aren't there just to bring you the remote control. That's not their existence. However, there are lessons they need to learn, even about making their own bed or helping out some chores or helping out with somewhere in the home where they're contributing. Also, if you'll do that, we found they actually have a vision for leaving that place, right? I mean, if you do everything for them, feed them everything they want, they don't have to do anything. It's all about them as child. Why would they ever leave? Why would they get a spouse? Why would they get their own house? Well, they just stick around. And, you know, we've seen lots of people who do that sort of thing, don't we? Or haven't we?
Yes.
All right. Questions. You can on YouTube, you can do it, or you can come join us. If you want to raise your hand, there's a way down there. I think we can notice that on Zoom. And any questions, if you just want to type them in to the chats, that's golden as well. Let me, while you're typing up your questions or getting the courage to talk, you know, anxiety. Let me talk about this question that I got today about a child that is a poor speller. So 11 years old, if I remember correctly, and just a really bad speller, and just tried to do things like in the Robinson curriculum and other things where, you know, you do spelling lists and that sort of thing. So I genuinely think, I mean, this is going to sound arrogant, but just because I'm arrogant, it doesn't mean I'm wrong, right? So I think I cracked the code on spelling. So all 5 of our children are good spellers. And we didn't do what you normally think about practicing spelling words at all. We did to a little bit degree, and I'll tell you in a minute what that was. But what I concluded about spelling is I watched and noticed what was going on with people. And Jody was a little bit of an example. Jody has dyslexia. So that's a complication can I tell that? It's a complication in spelling because, you know, the tendency to can move words around, numbers, different things. But she's not a bad speller at all. But what I noticed is there's a fundamental difference between good spellers and bad spellers. I'm a pretty good speller. I can misspell things, but who can't? But generally I don't. And here's why. I won't guess. Like, I refuse to guess on the spelling of a word. I will not do it. Now, I might write something down and I'll circle it. I'll put a little SP and circle it. So that's a spelling question for me to come back to later if I'm writing real fast. But I won't guess. And because I won't guess, I'll either spell a word that I know how to spell, or I'll pick a different word that I know how to spell. And third, I'll come around and figure out how to spell that word so I'm ready in the future. But what I'm not going to do is guess. And if you'll watch your poor spellers, they guess. And that's where the problem is. So the answer would be training our kids to quit guessing spelling words. And we have a process in the writing course. I mentioned this person, they have the course and they haven't gone through that part. So go through the whole course. Don't nag the kids, don't grade anything, just get through the course if you have it, because the whole course is designed to give them a whole new mindset and perspective on writing. And it hits punctuation and spelling and how to come up with ideas and how language works and all kinds of, this crazy stuff. But in there, the way you give feedback is what I show in the feedback video, that if you give feedback to a child so that they are rewarded for not guessing and punished, it's not good. It doesn't feel good to guess, and it feels good to not guess. So I would do a deal with the kids where, look, if you mark, or we got to where I think if you'll circle a word, we'll just know that means you're not sure about the spelling. I'll spell it for you. So I would literally, if they circled it, I'd spell it for them. So they're getting feedback on that spelling. If they misspell and don't circle it, then they're going to have to look up the word, find out on their own, probably not using Alexa or Google or something like that, Chat GPT, not using those tools. You're going to have to look in like an old book, a dictionary or something like that. And so that would take Alexa, stop. So that would take time. Maybe that happened. So that would take time, and they didn't want to do that. Now, Trip, my oldest, when we first started doing this, circled almost every word. I didn't care at all because they weren't all wrong. And he gets a feedback loop and he quits guessing. So however you go about it, train them not to guess. Now, traditional approach, if they have some commonly misspelled words, you start seeing them, you start keeping that list. And then you practice, they can rewrite that list a number of times or however you want to practice it. Even just 5 words a week, you're going to, before long, there are a common group of words that you use. And once you learn to spell them right, you're always spelling right. So that would be the way to do it. Now, when someone's 11 and they're a poor speller, there's going to be anxiety and frustration and some learning challenges that have been developed over time or may arise from something in the kid. I don't know the whole situation, so it could be anything. But if you understand that, they can build confidence also because they're starting to get words right. When they circle a word and lo and behold, they were right, that feels pretty good. And or if they didn't guess, that feels pretty good. But the whole game is to quit guessing. It's very similar. Let me just mention this to, at least the way I think about phonics or math facts. You just want to learn these things. You don't want to guess. You're not trying to guess on how it sounds. Or when you're reading out loud, it's not so much phonics, but when you're reading, it's all connected. Trying to guess what the word is instead of sounding it out. Sounding it out is not guessing. Dieffenbachia was mom's favorite houseplant. Okay. So instead of looking at it diffraction, I don't know. People do this all the time. Listen to kids read. Why are you guessing those words? Sound them out. Because that's what you do. You sound it out, and then you hear the sound, and then you can arrive at what the word is. Stop the guessing. Jeepers. How could I be clear? What do you want to add? I could be wrong, I guess. So far, it's worked. And I think it's a good explanation of why people are poor spellers, that they just are used to guessing, and good spellers don't guess. They just find out. So there's that piece. So let's see, what kind of questions do you have? Somebody talk to me. Well, I'm trying to figure out how to get to something. I see it.
Okay.
I'm
go
just
on.
checking over here too. All right, good. So here's a question. My kiddos, is there a way to post that? Does it post? Does anybody know? Apparently does in questions. Anyway, Liz says, my kiddos tend to sneak things a lot. Really? Never heard of that. I find soda cans in their room, candy wrappers in their drawers. Their desk drawers, not their undies.
Well, Fred.
I'm making sure. They are 9 and 11 girls. They know, number one, not to eat, drink in their rooms. And number two, soda cans and candy are occasional treats. And the ones they ate in their room weren't the ones we gave them. I want to trust them and have them feel good about being trusted. Well, you have no reason to trust them. So what you want to do is trust them because you have good reason. And they obviously are yeah, desk drawers. They are obviously not
They're not very good sneakers.
yeah, they're incompetent for starters. And obviously having a soda and getting caught feels better to them than not having a soda and not getting caught. So we can see, you know, something in the game there. The real question, Liz, you want to start with is, so what do you want? You know, and this is that imagination thing where you go, what do you want? And I'll just guess, you want your daughters not to eat and drink in their rooms, and I guess respect the rules. You know, you at least want them to clean up after themselves, you know, that sort of thing. But I think this is going to come down to with them, what's the consequence? Because obviously there's not much of a consequence. My theory would be you probably give them a lecture that involves some shame. You know, it goes like this. You know, girls, I just want to trust you. And we do this for you, and we give you candy sometimes and sodas, and we're being good that way, but we can't dump sugar in us all the time. And y'all are out there sneaking around and doing it. And it's just so disappointing. And I just feel so terrible, you know, with what we're trying to do and what we're trying to develop. And you're behind the scenes doing this stuff. And I want to trust you. I want to believe in you, but I don't. Well, so that, how's that?
Did you overhear me?
Yeah, I did overhear you.
And she needs a good consequence.
Yeah, I need a good, exactly. I don't know of a good consequence. Did you overhear me? Yes, that's what it sounds like. Okay, so the first thing I like to get moms especially, not totally sexist here on this topic, but I'm just noticing for some reason estrogen poisoning tends to go this way compared to testosterone poisoning. So the way moms tend to do it is they give you a talking to. I learned this from my mother. My mother, instead of spanking us, we're Alabama, old school. And instead of spanking us, we got over, I remember one time she sat down with my sister and me and said, you know, it hurt us more for our mother to give us a talking to. And we listened to her talking, and she said one of those speeches like that. And when she left the room, my sister and I died laughing. It was the funniest thing on the planet that we had gotten out of a spanking. That was so cool by having a talking to. So the first thing you want to do is when they violate something that there's a consequence for, you can't talk between them. It has to literally go from, you did this, here's the consequence. No conversation. And here's why. If you start talking to those kids, they will start turning to lawyers, and they'll give you their 5-point program and a poem there and some other things. And they're going to lay it out about how this affects, you know, the global economy and the people in Africa and climate change and how they're going to turn out emotionally. They're going to just bring their lawsuit, and they're going to turn you into a judge. And then you're going to have to judge, and then you're going to have to work on your judge and lawyer skills. And if you'll skip that and have a consequence after an action without the conversation, it works so beautifully because they connect in their head. I did this and this happened. And eventually they go, hey, maybe it's me. Yeah. So maybe if I don't do this, this won't happen. Whoa, I'm learning the secret of the universe, cause and effect. This is awesome, right? Respect. And you can trust them too, because they've earned it. They've grown in it. Just starting out trusting somebody, the last thing you want to do is teach your daughters to just trust people. That's crazy. They're going to start dating someday, some version of dating, whatever you call it. And you want them to just trust somebody from the beginning? No. Girls should never trust boys ever until they have no choice, that they've just proved it out over time. This is what happened. Knights have to prove they're trustworthy. You start out assuming somebody's trustworthy, you're just going to be flim-flammed all the time. And let me tell you, as a veteran boy, don't trust us. There's just absolutely no reason to do that sort of thing. All right. So a consequence, consequences for kids when you create them are unique to the child. Okay. So if you threaten a rabbit with throwing them into a briar patch, right? So if you misbehave, I'm gonna throw you in that briar patch. Well, they live there. They like it. I think that's in literature somewhere. So it's got to be unique to them that they don't like it, some consequence. And I usually, if I can do it, I always like to tie the consequence to the theme somehow. So one time the kids were supposed to put their bikes up. They had a place to put the bikes, not in front of the front door. We don't want to fire and run out and break our legs on the way out of the fire. We don't want bikes in the front door where they came in and out. So we had a place for them. Sure enough, after that, somebody put their bike there. Well, I got the bike and I put it up in a yopon tree right outside the front door for 24 hours, and they couldn't ride their bike, and they had to look at it in the yopon tree, and everybody else had to look at it. So everybody looked at the bike in the yopon tree, and from then on, I just don't remember anybody putting their bike anywhere but where it needed to go, right? So I was connecting the bike to the consequence. So when I look at soda, I would say something like soda and candy. Now, I'm not sure where they're getting this, so that's its own problem. And leaving in their rooms is a problem. You really kind of have two things. If you're gonna sneak, would you get good at it, please? This is crazy. But I would say it's more like, and you have to think this through for them, but I can imagine, I'll just give you an example of what I might do, or Jody and I might do, and you tell me what you would think. So I would say, okay, if we catch you with soda when you're not supposed to be drinking soda, or as we called it in Alabama, Coke. So if you're drinking that or eating candy, so we'll do a soda. If you drink soda and you get caught, obviously, you're going to only drink water, like literally, for 2 days, 3 days, whatever. It's your meals. The sodas, I'm locking them up. I'm getting them out of the house. There are none here. It's a done deal. So it's going to be that. If you want to drink water for 3 days, let's just take 3 days. It might be 1 day. It may be one glass of water would torture them. I don't know. But if you do that, it's water. And here's the way this is going to work. We're going to try this in an experiment and see if you can learn to be respectful of our rules and quit sneaking soda. When you grow up, you can drink all you want, rot your teeth out, go for it. But in this house, this isn't what we do. That's not our game. And so we're going to try this and we're going to see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, we're going to figure out something more. And then we're going to figure out something more, because all we're doing is we're going to try to find out how much pain you're going to need to be in to be respectful of the rules. There's no, you don't seem to know how to just decide. So we're going to have to set up a context for you to get it, right? Just like if you show up late for work, if you show up late for work and you show up late for work and you show up late for work, guess what they do to you? They let you go. That's how it works. So there are consequences in this world. And if you don't learn at home what we need to teach you, God is going to take you on a field trip, and it won't be fun, because the world will teach you in much, much harsher ways. So if, so it's something like that. And if that doesn't work, we'll expand it out somehow else. You might want to try to figure out how's this happening? What's, I know in prisons things sneak drugs in and stuff like
Where are they
that.
getting that
Yeah,
from?
how
Their
that happened.
supply from?
The candy is a similar thing. So, if y'all have desserts, that can take care of some of the sweet things. We'd have a dessert night once a week, I think, like that. But again, the candy may be something you can't exactly do with candy. I don't think you want to just like, oh, you ate candy, so you're eating oatmeal for supper. I probably wouldn't do that. But I probably would have some kind of consequence that's more about candy, throws a bunch of sugar, so does the soda. I assume it's not diet something. And so we're going to have to work those calories off. So you can come up with you're going to have a candy chore because you ate candy. We got to work those calories off, sweeping the outside, painting the old wooden fence. I don't know what you're going to do, but some kind of consequence they understand the consequence, probably written up, put on the refrigerator. And this is important. If I had mentioned it, no talking, right? No lecturing, no discussion. They did it, and here's the consequence. And so when you start doing this little book behind me, the absolute quickest way to help your child change, that's part of the game. Your child wants to feel good. And what happens is if they do good things, by the way, another thing you throw in here, here's the game. If you go all week without soda and candy, Saturdays, you get a soda and a candy. Congratulations. You can also reward them if that's part of your mindset or mentality, etc. There are obviously exceptions in vacation, or people get Halloween candy. I don't know what all people do, but that's the idea. So she writes, Liz writes, if you drink soda and get caught, you're going to only drink water for a few days. I really like this. And make sure it's an exact number, not just your whim. So they feel the sense of responsibility, control. Start one day, start with two, start with one, but you can always escalate it. That would be so impactful to them because they like flavored water, milk, anything but plain water. Yeah, those girls are
Fred doesn't like water.
My peeps. I totally get it. If I'm dying of thirst, really dying of thirst and famished and about to go to the hospital, water's fine. Candy chore, so good. Clean the bathroom would be hard for them, so they don't care for that. And no talking takes the pressure off me. Well, yeah, and it puts the pressure on the cause and effect of the consequence. So it's supposed to just be a Friday night movie night treat. There are other devious things I'm thinking about, but that's good. You want to play with it. Consequences are an experiment. You don't want to make it forever. You want to say, here, we're going to do this for 2 weeks or a month, and then we're going to sit down and evaluate how it went. That's certainly something we can do. If you really want to cure this, basically, if you, I think the bathroom thing works. I'm not going to say this other thing. It's not worth it. What are the questions? So that's enough to think about. And that's sort of what we do. If we can give you a starter kit, you're on the way. So questions. Ashley writes on YouTube, my 12 and 11-year-old have been requesting smartphones, tablets of their own. They've probably been doing it for 6 or 7 years, I would think. It's definitely not happening this year. But what should I look for to determine when the time is appropriate for this tech? So yeah, that gets it gets tricky because what's the purpose? What's the limits? What are you aiming for? With that technology, what their maturity. You can also leverage things with it because it could be. I remember one time Trip came in and said, "Daddy, I want a dog." And I said, "You're not old enough for a dog." And he said, "Well, when will I be old enough?" And I said, "Well, off the top of my head," he was 3, I think. I said, off the top of my head, you still suck your thumb. And he may have been, how old was he?
2 or 3.
Okay.
No, it must have been older than 2.
So
3.
you still suck your thumb And then you carry these little blankets around that you call bas. What do they call them nowadays? Binkies or what do they call them?
It was loveys or just,
Okay.
it was just a little cloth thing.
Cloth thing. And then eventually we had, did he just have one?
No.
Yeah. So we started having multiple of them. So if one got left somewhere, it wasn't a crisis. You can't have one. You could have a less of most of them were diapers. And I said, when you quit sucking your thumb and quit carrying your bas around, have to have them, you'll be old enough for a dog. So I didn't know, because I'd also taught him that he has a will. I said, you know, most parents don't tell you this. You have a will. You can just choose, like raise your hand. And he raised his hand up. I said, put it down, pat your face. He patted his face. I said, how'd you do that? He said, I just did. Yeah. I said, you chose to. You have a will. Congratulations. So you got this thumb and you got these bas. And someday when you decide I'm going to put my thumb and I'm not going to carry the bas around, you'll be getting old enough, mature enough to have it. Well, the next day, I think, he came into his mom and said, Mom, here are all my bas. Gave him a whole stack of these rags. And I quit sucking my thumb. And then he left. And he never sucked his thumb again. And he never asked for a ba again. It was like done. And Jody was sneaking at night with a flashlight to make sure he wasn't cheating or something. But his little callus, was it there? Or was it on his thumb? Went away. You know, he just quit. He just decided he got old enough. So when I think about phones, I go, so there's some piece in this that you could leverage it, that when you get not necessarily to an age, but to a place of responsibility. Like, I mean, if it was, you know, how about, for example, when you quit sneaking soda and candy in your room and violate these other rules, you know, or gripe, you know, as long as you still gripe when you have to do schoolwork, you're not old enough for a phone. Now, that's just a leverage thing. The other question is really about when's the right time. And you have to figure that out and figure out how they use it and what for, what the game is. Sometimes it's safety. Sometimes it's to be able to call grandma. Sometimes it's to connect with their friends because they're all doing it. And in this media, let me just warn you, this media does have a tendency, technology, the more technology tends to isolate people. They diminish in developing social skills, and they tend to separate and play with technology. And by the way, I'm quoting something from 1987 that I read by a guy named John Nesbitt that talked about technology. Go Google it and you'll find out. Yeah, it's that. So I think you're just trying to think through what they're doing with it, how they'll use it, why they're going to use it. And some of it, you don't want to make your kids weird, right? So it's, you know, some of that's the world we're in, but by the same token, if they misuse it, you know, you set up some parameters, and if they misuse it, the phone's got to go, or at least for a break, you know.
There's also ways you can have an extra phone at the house that is a shared phone. You can have one that doesn't have it only can like text and call. You can get that kind of a phone. I know some friends that have younger, what do we call them, tweens now. They'll have those, or like I said, this is the shared phone. If you're going away and you might need one, but it's a house phone. It's not their phone. Same thing with the tablets or something. I think that might be a good place to just start. And, you know, you only use this in front of us in the den, or where, you know, the kitchen, you don't take it to your own room. Some things like that. With all of our kids, they didn't get a cell phone until they were, I think it was actually 16. And actually they started paying part of our cell phone bill every month, and they bought their own phone. So it was a big deal. And I remember our youngest child, who was at home 3 years without his siblings. I can't remember the exact age, but anyway, we were going to let him get a phone like a year earlier. For some reason, there was a need or something, but he had to ask his siblings if that would be okay, because we had a set age. You know,
he had to get a variance
so
from all the siblings, because I didn't want to hear, didn't she does this way.
So anyway.
Yeah, and that, you know, it'd be like a computer. Imagine they were wanting their own computer, or like you said, a shared tablet. I mean, a tablet each. Well, they could share one. Like we had computers and they had computer time, and we had a way you could earn more. It's mostly on the weekends. You had TV/computer time. You could use that time. You had some daily and you had more on the weekends. And if you read extra, for every minute you read, I think you got a minute of computer time, something like that. Is that how we did it? It sounds like it. So if they, read for an extra hour or two, they might get, maybe it wasn't that formula. Maybe it was a half
Well, it was a ratio.
a half,
but-
just some ratio, but it was something reasonable.
And we didn't do the, like they didn't have Game Boys and, what are
Yeah.
they called? Nintendos and all that.
Yeah,
So-
we didn't do that. They would play some games that we approved of on
On the
the
computers.
computer. Some games that were just blood sport, just didn't seem to be a match for our standards. But they'd have computer time, but they would have to alternate and share that thing. And sometimes they get exceptions. If they'd filmed a video, a little movie, Forrest could have more time to just edit. All he's doing was editing. So it's a different activity than, socially cruising out there and trying to find out what's going on in the world. And, I'm TikTok famous. I'm a social influencer.
Well, yeah, and things
right?
have changed on that front from our kids
Exactly.
being teenagers.
So, all right. Thank you for the spelling tips. I hope that's enough. We'll see where it goes. I find myself the most insecure about writing and giving my son feedback. At first glance, his writing is intimidating and all over the place. He's 8. Any tips for that? Yes, Jessica, get the writing course and let him go through it, and then have him write every day and follow the instructions, because you can get him to write better every day. And most of what goes on out there hurts writing. We know from 100 years of studies that the more grammar you teach children, the worse they write. So because they're not really fooling with language, they're trying to get rules straight and they can't find their voice. And so what we're up to with the writing course is getting them into a regular routine of learning to find their own voice, especially once they understand how language and punctuation and all this stuff works. It's not near as complicated as school people make it. It's a natural function of speaking. We don't have, fortunately, we don't have teachers having whole curriculums teaching us how to talk right. Talk right comes from interacting with people. That's the nature of the game. And so when you interact, if you ask for a piece of cake, but you say, I want a fimflopple, you're not going to give them the cake because you don't know what fimflopple is. And so there's a feedback system. Well, once they learn language, learning how then to write that kind of language down is part of what our whole course is. And that's the way I do it. Now, if you don't get the course or don't have the course, any tips for that? Yeah. So the tips would be, at first glance, his writing is intimidating and all over the place. He's 8. Well, first of all, most 8-year-olds are not going to write well. So you might want to do more copy work. So he's actually experiencing some writing that has quality in it. So it kind of teaches him stuff. So he copies good passages. The other thing you can do is just have him write sentences that make sense instead of a whole paragraph. He just set separate sentences. And if he needs to, write a separate sentence about 5 things you see in the room, and what I mean is, the book is on the shelf. Good. If he wrote the bookshelf, then he gets feedback. So that's just either the bookshelf or you left out, some other words, and working with just those sentences. Because look, all writing is built on the sentence. And so if they learn to master a sentence, you can put some of those together and you get what's called a paragraph. Put a few more together, you can get a chapter. A few more together, you get a book. A few more together, you can get a encyclopedia. But it's all sentence by sentence.
A little bit about the cell phone. When they're I was talking to a air conditioner
read something else?
repairman yesterday. It was just follow up on that. Like, what if they're away from home?
Hang on. Is there something you're responding to that
Yes.
you read?
Ashley's.
So we need to read it.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
There are times when they are without our parents, spending time with friends at their houses, church youth group function, and I felt like it would be have been good for them to have a phone to contact us. We had a air conditioner repairman at the house yesterday, and we were talking about his 4 kids, and I think the oldest was 11, and they were talking about that and how all their friends have the phones and all. But it basically, he said, yeah, and I told them, great, all your friends have phones and all their parents have phones, so you just turn to one of them and borrow it if you need me. And he said, what instances might you need to have a phone? And every one of their instances, they just got kind of silly. What if there's a fire? And he said, if there's a fire, you leave the house, and but basically, because so many people do have phones, I can't imagine a situation where a kid's going to be at a playground, a soccer field, a person's
But they
house.
can't say, can I borrow your phone?
You can't say, may I borrow your phone?
Well, she did add, she said, okay, I like this house phone, shared idea. And you need some boundaries. That's part of what you're trying to just figure out. And you're going to have to learn. And Ashley also wrote, I don't want my kids to be weird. I think that is actually a real important thing. So, there are movies that I wasn't that thrilled about, but they were all in. And so what we'd do is go watch a movie, and then we'd go have nachos and debrief it, at least think. But I didn't want to make them weird that they don't know vocabulary and movies and things like that. So, welcome to that piece of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Finding the grammar rings true. It's overwhelming. All the rules slows them down so much to the point of analysis paralysis. It really does. And that's part of what we do is teach kids how to think about punctuation in terms of how you want it read out loud. So periods or pauses, commas or shorter pauses. And you can tell, Jody and I just recently, she was reading something to me, a devotional thing we're doing. And I went, is there a comma after that word? And I didn't know, but the way it read, didn't sound like it. Turned out there was a comma, but she didn't pause. So it wasn't making sense, the way those words blended together. And I'd get the kids to I'd read it how they punctuated it. And it would be wrong. They go, no, there's a comma that needs to go there, because what they learned through the writing course and how the thing works. So if you can get the grammar stuff out of their head, and there are a lot and the punctuation and the worried about saying it right, doing it right, and all the rest, then they're free to write and learn how to improve. So it's a big deal. But actually, if you'll read it to them how they punctuate, you'll find they'll know where the corrections are. I also, honestly, I get them just go in the garage or outside or somewhere and read it out loud the way you've written it, and see if that sounds like you want it to be read by someone else. Because if they learn to write for how someone will read it aloud, it actually adds, there's a bonus here. It adds a poetical, musical language quality to it. So the actual way they write sounds better because they're tuning into how it would sound. And I think we lose a lot of that with people just writing and not connecting it to how it's read out loud. I'd say the same for reading. Those kids all need to read out loud some. It's good practice. It connects their ear. It doesn't have reading speed, but I'm pretty sure speed reading is not, it's not what they claim. I've had 6 of those courses and I can do it, but it's not the same as really focusing on comprehension. That's the game with reading. It's not about reading. It's about really understanding it. And so there's shortcuts with that.
Yeah.
All right. This was fun. I hope you found it helpful. Brag on us to other people, subscribe to the channel, go to independenthomeschool.com and sign up for our mailing list, get the free videos on how we homeschooled. We're sharing opinion, what we understand, trying to think it through. We do it based on principles. Seems to help. If you do it different and better, I'm for you. And that's what we're all up to. So pass this around, tell people about it. And let's keep putting some educated leaders out there in the world, because there's not going to be that much competition if we'll just keep at it.